Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cryptid Crew podcast. I'm your host, Mark Childers, and I'm really looking forward to this show today. But before we get started, if you've had an encounter or an experience or something unexplainable, please shoot me an email with your contact information at the Cryptid Crew podcast at gmail.com. And of course, no pressure to be on the show, just information and like to read the stories. I'd like to welcome on our guest, author of Lower Alabama Bigfoot, No Longer a Myth, outdoorsman, a professional in the healthcare field, and actually, can I say a radio personality?
I don't know about that, but I've got a little bit of radio.
Yes, well, I'm glad. I'm excited for you to come on today. I've been looking forward to this one for a little while.
Well, me too. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, good deal, good deal. Well, let's just dive into this. But before we get started on the book and some things in it, I noticed that we do have something in common, and I guess that's the lost art of running dogs.
That is a lost art. You know, back when I was coming up, that was the only way we deer hunted. If you didn't have a dog, you just about wouldn't see one in my neck of the woods.
Same here. That's how I grew up hunting, with my grandfather and my dad. And, when the dogs, started that barking, you knew they hit one, the hair on the back of your neck stood up and your adrenaline started pumping.
Oh, there was nothing more exciting as a kid. I mean, I still get excited about it today, but not as many people do it anymore. It's expensive. There's a lot of rules, and back then there was expanse, land. I mean, you could run hundreds and hundreds of acres and all you needed was permission. And right. Now with the different hunting clubs and, it's just harder to find that anymore. And pulp mill, leases, Rayonier and stuff like that. It's tough.
Yes. We used to hunt on some paper company land and some other places, that adjoined it, private property and stuff. But it was definitely something that I enjoyed growing up, and I wish more people did it now, but it's like you said, it's just something that doesn't quite happen as often as it used to.
No, sir.
No, but I'll tell you what, let's just dive right into your book. And if you could just tell the listeners who haven't read your book, what got you interested in the subject of Bigfoot or skunk ape? Well,
I guess you could say I've always had an interest in it. I didn't know really anything about it. My mom was a big enthusiast, and she actually watched The Legend of Boggy Creek live in California at the theater, and she said it scared her to death. And then when I watched it as a kid, it scared me to death. And, back then, especially me, and my uncles and aunts, we used to love being terrified. So that was a fun thing to do. And my mom had a couple of books, and I can remember looking at the pages. But I'll be honest with you, I never really truly, I wasn't one way or the other. I wasn't ever the one I'd say, there ain't nothing like that out there. Because to me, obviously, there at least at one time had been. But I couldn't be one of those people that said there definitely was either. And growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was young in the 70s, but in the 80s, there were stories that would come out and hunters would talk and you'd hear stuff here and there. But, people were quiet, especially in the South back then. I mean, they didn't tell a whole lot. And unless you were there when it happened, a lot of times it wouldn't get out. So until I leased that land that I still lease today, and my son had that experience where he had the shooting house shook and I was mad. I mean, I'm in a climber close to him because he was just starting to hunt on his own and carry a gun on his own. And, he had gotten that trust factor from me that he was man enough to handle it.
Sure.
And he started hollering, and when I got to him, the boy was scared to death, and it shook the shooting house, and he found we found footprints on the road, and then I started paying attention, and there was one thing after another, and other incidents happened, which is in the book, and then other people I found out started talking about things they had happened close by, and it just kind of was a snowball effect, to be honest with you, to the point where you just couldn't deny it.
Right. It was probably almost to the point for you, I guess, where it was almost overwhelming with the reports I've read in your book, and I know me and you have talked before briefly prior to this, but it had to be. I guess just tell me, what were you thinking then at the time?
I didn't really know what to think. I knew my boy wasn't lying, and he had seen something. And these footprints, I double checked them and looked. I mean, they weren't bare, I tried to dismiss it any way I can, and I still do that. If I go out somewhere, if somebody calls me and they think they have something, if I can come up with any other explanation for it, that's what I stick with.
Right. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I guess I think your mind does not want to comprehend what just happened.
No, you can see one 10 feet away and your mind won't comprehend it. That's why a lot of these things, in my opinion, aren't shot at. Everybody's, well, how come they don't shoot? Well, I mean, number one, you're in shock. Number two, you're not sure what you're looking at. And number three, you're scared to death.
Right.
So even the one that I saw at a distance years later, I mean, I watched it cut across that field, and to this day, I'm like, okay, did I really see that or did I not?
Well, I guess you question yourself, well, is this supposed to exist?
I mean, look at the article the story in there about the forester that was in the woods, and he had one within 15, 20 feet of his truck, and he thought it was a tree until it walked off.
Right, I remember reading that. I think that's where he went to the same spot just about every morning. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, and if I remember right, he did not come back to that spot, did he? After that?
No, and now he don't go in the woods anymore without a gun, and but his brain saw it as a tree until it actually moved and walked off.
That's like you said. There's skeptics that don't want to believe or don't. Of course, I've never seen one. I've studied it and researched it for years, and have just about made my mind up that they do exist because there's just so many reports, and there's so many that are left out there because of people being afraid of ridicule.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And you're seeing less and less of that. And I guess the one incident that really shook me awake, that's like, okay, these things really are real, was the roar or the howl or the scream that I heard in 2016. That rattled me to the core. There's nothing. I grew up on a farm. I've been around bulls my whole life. To describe how loud and how deep this thing was when it yelled I can't. I mean, it's almost like if you took 2 or 3 bulls and put them together, and it was probably 200 yards away, but my chest was literally vibrating.
Right.
Nothing in these lower Alabama woods should be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and there's nothing that's supposed to be in the woods that makes that noise, because most, I haven't told you this, I have a recording from a neighbor, and I'll share that with you at some point here in the near future, that they had made at 2:00 in the morning off of their front porch. It's nothing I've ever heard, and nothing he's ever heard. And he's an outdoorsman, has been, and has hiked and done that type of thing most of his life. But you could tell when I talked to him that it was actually, it was something real. It was not fabricated by the emotion in his face, when he had told me about it.
And it's not something you want to be close to either.
No.
When you hear it.
I agree with you, because what I had heard from his recording, that was just so guttural, so loud, such a powerful something, something powerful. It had large lungs, just a large animal of some sort.
Awesome. Yeah. It'll wake you up. I tell everybody, nobody's really a believer till they have an experience, and then there's no doubt.
Right.
You can be on the fence a little bit, but when you have an experience, without a doubt it's there.
And let me ask you this. I'm going to transition into something just a little bit different. That was in your book as well. The wood knock that you wrote about in there. And the recording my neighbor had as well had a knock or a rock clack, I guess you could call it. What do you think that is? Is that a way for them to communicate to one another, to warn something, warn you they're there, or what do you think about that?
In my personal opinion, and talking with the guys from the GCBRO and the times I've heard it, number one, I do think it's a form of communication. I do. And if you'll look at great apes, they do the same thing. Number two, the incidences that it seems to have happened with me and with other people I've talked to that have no idea on, they just had it happen. It's almost like they're warning, hey, there's somebody in the area. And then another one answers back, okay, I'm over here or whatever. But I know when it happened with me, it shook me so bad I almost fell out of the stand. I mean, I was about half asleep as why.
Right.
And it was right behind me. And as soon as it did it, another one answered several hundred yards down the property line. And I was like, what? I didn't even know what a wood knock was. I found out later, probably watching Finding Bigfoot or something, about wood knock. I was like, what in the world is a wood knock? And then I was like, oh, well, that makes sense on what happened to me. So, nobody understands these creatures completely. If they tell you they do, I'm not sure I would trust them.
Right. I just don't think there's enough information. There's quite a bit. I say quite a bit of information. You have the wood knocks. You have these footprints with dermal ridges on the bottom that nobody can really fabricate. And these incidents that all these people have had, thousands of them, over such a long period of time. And I know you had mentioned that as well in the book, how some stories stretch from the 20s and 30s. And I believe was it Forest Home?
Yes, there was. And you know what? That's what's amazing to me too as well. And I just got an incident last weekend. A family called me over down the road from where I live to, and the lady's probably in her 70s, and said her grandmother, when she was a child, and this is right down from Burnt Corn Creek there in the book, went out to feed the cows in the cattle lot, and there was one standing in the lot.
Oh, wow.
And her grandmother remembered it plain as day, and actually several folks from the town got together and kind of went after it or hunted it, didn't find anything. And but again, that was another story from 100 years ago that some of the older people remember very vividly. And it's in the same area that all these other sightings had happened. And that just happened last weekend. And she said her grandmother was probably 10 or 11, went out there to feed the cows in the lot, and it was standing right in the middle of the lot with the cows.
Wow. And there's also something you had mentioned as well about, I think one of the witnesses you ran into had some cattle that may have been, or they thought their cattle had been killed by trespassers possibly, or people hunting.
Yes, there's been several in that area. And again, this was all back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s mostly, and early 80s. It's almost, to me, it's like, I haven't heard of any cattle any recently, really. But back then, for sure, it seemed like, and I'm not really sure why, but I do know the guy I talked to that night, the guy was furious with me because I was on his property because I was part of that hunting club, and he ran me off his property with a gun.
Right.
People down south usually don't do that. They're usually quick to help you, and especially at this time. And I thought it was odd, but he had thought we were killing his cows. But the guy I talked to was like, no. He said that wasn't nobody killed those cows. I helped him drag those cows out, and he said they weren't killed by a man or a gun.
Nothing
but
like that.
That was the only explanation he could come up with. And that same guy, actually witnessed one of these things take a hog out of the pen around midnight one night out in his backyard.
So he's the same guy that you're saying helped drag the cattle out? Okay, right.
Mr. Bob.
So he I'm sure he knows then what,
well, he didn't at the time,
right.
But he knew later. He said, I know what killed those cows later,
Right. I'd been through, I was leaving Pensacola, and I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but I came up through Jay, Florida, in that area, and stopped and talked to some people, and talked to one of the ladies that was actual witness, and then someone else that had heard a story as well. But when you get to looking on the map, and I did a little bit of research before this episode today, from, I guess it's about Crestview. Mm-hmm. You go north, almost to Greenville, and then you go west toward Grove Hill, mm-hmm. and then back southeast towards Seminole, Florida, and then back over towards Crestview. It's about I think I figured it up, about 3.5 million acres. And a lot of that is rural, and you have the Blackwater River State Forest.
Right.
The Conecuh National Forest, which is, I think they're connected. It comes up in your area, correct?
Correct. Uh-huh.
And then the lady I had talked, or the people I had talked with, and Jay, she had a sighting and right close to the Blackwater River State Forest, and that all runs together. So there's no telling. There's so much land, so much water access through there, and food for something like that to travel and live and never be seen.
Absolutely. Blackwater, especially back in the 70s, was very, very wild. I mean, it was a pristine place for something like that. And what's not in the book talking about the cattle, and kind of goes with what you're saying. I talked with a guy probably about a year ago that had read my book, and he told me about an incident that happened between Evergreen and Andalusia back in the 70s. I think late the 70s, about 79. He said there was a farmer over there that had a bunch of cows that were getting killed, and they thought it was a bear, but they couldn't ever find the bear. Okay. And they actually got some dogs out of Tennessee to come down. Some bear dogs.
Right.
And they run this thing, and the guy said he had a shotgun. He's going down in his truck. He goes down in the field. He said they got all the dogs spread out, and all of a sudden you see these cattle backing up. And he told his driver, he said, that thing's in there at that pond. He said it was a little wooded pond. So he jumped out of the truck with his shotgun, had some shells in his hand, and when he got up, he said this thing was sitting in the pond. It stood up. He said he didn't know what he was looking at, but he started just blasting it with the shotgun.
Wow.
That thing ran off. The dogs got behind it. He said it didn't take long. He said every single dog come back with their tails between their legs, covered with feces, bleeding.
Oh, wow.
Single dog. Every one of them come back limping. And he said he was still going towards it, and he stopped, and he said, well, maybe I shouldn't be going that way.
That's a smart man.
And he said nobody talked about it. He said those guys kind of loaded up their dogs and left, and nobody ever mentioned it again, and the cattle's mutilations or killing stopped after that.
And that was in the, you said 70s?
I believe he said it was around 79.
79, okay. you had mentioned, or I had mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people, you had talked with, coming forward now with stuff. I think back then they just afraid of ridicule or did not want to talk about that kind of thing, wanted to keep it hush, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, they were just quiet and people minded their own business for the most part. And, and look, how many times have you been in the woods? And I've talked to people, I still talk to people that will hear things and see things, but then, like you said earlier, they just dismiss it. Well, that was nothing. And they just move on.
Right. Question themselves, or just don't want to think about it. Maybe a defense mechanism for, I didn't see that.
I had a guy not too long ago, it's a big hog hunter, that was laughing at me, and he was talking about, I'm in the woods all the time, and he said, I've seen some weird stuff, and he night hunts them, he said, I did see a man step on the backside of a field one time at 1 o'clock in the morning. He said, I just assumed it was somebody trespassing. He said, but now the weirdest thing I ever saw, and he didn't believe any of it, he said, is I saw a chimpanzee one time in the swamps over there in the Alabama River. Me and my buddy both saw it. He said, and it was up there where I live in a place called Maben Lake. And he said, me and my buddy saw it. And he said, that thing turned around and walked off. He said, I said, well, man, I said, Wes, I said, that didn't ring any bells to you? Well, no. He said, I just figured Hank Williams Jr. had a chimpanzee and it got out.
Oh, wow.
Because Hank has a place there at Maven Lake, or used to,
Okay.
And I said, okay, so you believe Hank had a chimpanzee that got out, that was in the, I said, come on, man. And it walked away on 2 legs, and after a while he looked at me and said, damn, Ashley, damn. You reckon? I said, oh, yeah. I said, you did. And I said, the scary thing is the mother wasn't close. I said, I promise you, she was watching you from somewhere.
Yeah, more than likely. If he thought it was a chimpanzee, I guess it had to be a juvenile, I'm assuming. Yes.
Yes.
And it wasn't by itself, I'm sure.
No. But in his mind for years, it was Hank Williams Jr.'s chimpanzee.
And what are the odds of that?
I mean, he said, well, I swear I saw it. Me and so-and-so saw it plain as day. It was in the middle of the day. We were heading out there to fish. I said, okay. I said, now what do you think? And he just looked at me and said, damn. He said, I'm rethinking it. I said, yeah. Exactly.
I'll tell you what, are you familiar with Torreya State Park or in the Panhandle?
I'm not sure.
Well, it's I believe it's east of Blackwater River State Forest.
How do you spell that? Is that
Torreya State Park?
No, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
Well, the reason I'm saying that, what convinced me about these is some thermal imaging footage. Are you familiar with Stacy Brown Jr.?
I'm not.
Okay, well, him and his dad had got some footage, I believe it was in the early 2000s, in the Panhandle, out one night. And if you ever get a chance to, look it up, it's very convincing that you see something, hiding from him, and they didn't know what they was looking at the time. And then it crosses a trail, in one large step that, when they did a comparison, a human couldn't do it, and how large it was compared to the person that did the comparison. It was just very convincing, and you can tell they were genuine.
It's mind blowing. I mean, and I still don't understand everything about it. And I want to tell people out there, I don't have all the answers. I don't. And all I've done in the book and all I'm doing is just relaying personal experiences and then talking with everybody else on their experiences and laying it out there. You can make up your own mind, but what is the odds that everybody is wrong?
All right.
There's something out there, and it amazes me how they even survive in these lower Alabama swamps in the middle of August.
Right.
I mean, right. I can't make sense out of a lot of it, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Let me ask you this. I noticed a picture that was in your book of a stick structure. I think it was is it Goat Swamp, maybe?
Yes, in Pine Orchard.
What do you think about that? What's your opinion of the stick structures? Because I have seen them doing some research, and I don't know if. I'll stop talking and let you answer that one.
Well, again, if I'm not mistaken, and I know, great apes will do the same thing. And it's kind of a road sign, so to speak. I don't know exactly what it means, but I think it kind of marks their territory.
Right.
Kind of like the way a buck will lay down rubs on trees, it kind of marks their territory. Now, some of the guys with the GCBRO said they'll make some of them and actually hunt behind them. Some of the formations, and they usually are near really good trails. So that, you could debate that, but in my opinion, it's probably more of a form of communication that, hey, so-and-so came through here.
Right. Yeah, that's, from what I've researched and seen, that's what it seems like. It's either marking a territory or, like you said, some form of communication, like a travel route or something. But they're made, there's no doubt, there's no animal that we know of that's going to make that. A bear doesn't have a thumb to move sticks around or limbs and make them look like a teepee or whatever,
No, and I've got a doctor friend who's got land close to that area, like just within a few miles, and beautiful property. Hardly anybody hunts it. I mean, it's pristine. And he's found structures like this on his place. And I remember him coming into work, one time saying, you know what, I don't really believe in that stuff. He said, but I found some structures out there. He said, and there's no way the water got high enough for it to flood. And I just don't know how all these sticks got in that formation. I think it's more, again, a lot of people, that's just something a lot of people wouldn't pay attention to.
Right, right. I could see where you could easily think that a creek or a river overflowed and pushed some sticks or limbs or whatever down and made something. But
unless it's on top of a hill.
Exactly. Yes, and then made in a formation that I've seen some pictures, and stuff that's just like that was done on purpose, So
absolutely.
I'm going to transition into one more thing before we wind it up. I guess it's the railroad tracks. The Drury Road, did I say that right? Okay. The lights, the orbs of some sort or strange lights you had talked about.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Okay. I have no clue. The weird thing is apparently a lot of people see this stuff. A lot of people see it around. These creatures are in areas that are hot with these creatures. I don't understand that. But I've actually had some calls from some people in North Alabama, and I can't remember the name of the town right now, that apparently this phenomenon happens quite a bit. The family I sat down with last weekend said they have seen lights like what I'm talking about, that you're talking about in that area. This particular night, I mean, honestly, I pulled across the railroad tracks and stopped. My son got out, I got out. And as I was doing something, I said, son, where's the train at? And he's like, Dad, there is no train. I said, what? And I walked over there and there was no train, and this thing was big, and then it hit me. I said, this wasn't a bright light to look at.
Right.
It was more of a glowing light, probably 8 foot up off the tracks, and it looked to be as big around as a beach ball.
Right.
But we both saw it, and we both thought it was a train because he was just getting to the age of driving, and I was like, yeah, this is why you need to stop at these old railroad tracks, You need to always pay attention, and then boom, there was no train there. So
no train.
Yeah, and I've talked to another guy there that's seen some of the same stuff on those tracks just further down. I don't have an explanation.
Right. That's something that fascinates me as well. I have a friend of mine that before he even believed in any of this, or even, I guess, Bigfoot or Sasquatch crossed his mind. He had been camping with some friends, and they saw an orb floating. I guess it was a little bit below the tree line, in the trees, but below the least tallest limb. And they kind of walked over towards it, trying to figure out what it was, because there was, they were out in the woods camping, and there's nobody else around. And one of his buddies, like I said, walked towards it, and it just kind of started floating off, and it disappeared. And then after it disappeared, they heard crashing through the woods, like something running through the woods. And they had no clue what they had just witnessed. And, if one person would have seen it, maybe, not sure, but he had 2 or 3 people with him, and fairly reputable, person.
Well, I want to tell you something that is weird. Now, I did not put this in the book, because, to me it deals with something else, but it was in the book, the area where we found foot tracks crossing the dirt road and went into this little slough, and then just kind of disappeared. I saw that one night hunting by myself, and this is out off the Alabama River in a little place called Hibbert, Alabama. I mean, this place is isolated. It may have a population of 5, okay?
Right.
And I'm sitting there on the grill, drinking a beer, talking on the phone, and these lights appeared just like that. And these trees across this little road, and I mean, they went up to the tops of the trees, it went down, it went up, it circled around. It was lighting the whole tops of these trees up.
Oh, wow.
I thought maybe somebody was shooting off some flares. Well, it spooked me. I got off the phone. I was telling whoever I was talking to, I believe it was my uncle, I was like, man, you ain't going to believe this, but I'm seeing these lights as I'm talking to you. I went into the camp house, barricaded the door, stuck my rifle towards the door. Next morning, got up, hunted, came back, and did some walking in that area where the lights were.
Right.
And I found 2 old graves right there.
Ooh. Okay.
From a mom and an infant. It was hard to read, but it looked like she may have died in childbirth.
Right.
And it was horrible, and it was right there. And nobody knew it was there. Even the people that hunted did not know those graves.
Never knew. So how did it have I guess it did, I'm assuming it had the years on there?
It did. It did, and it was like the early 1820s, 1830s.
Oh, wow. So it was almost 200 years old then.
And had I known those graves were there, I'd have probably gotten out of there that night. Right.
You sound like me.
I'll hunt a Bigfoot, but I don't really want nothing to do with a ghost.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I don't know what that was, but they do seem to have a lot of these lights around some of these areas that have Bigfoot sightings, and that is weird. I don't understand it.
It's just something unexplainable. I'm not sure about it myself. Well, Ashley, I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and we're going to have to do this. Maybe we can do this later on down the road.
Oh, Mark, that would be great. I've got tons, more stories since the book, and let me share this with you and your listeners that may find this interesting. Probably the best, I guess one of the reasons of writing a book is, and everybody enjoys it. Everybody says they enjoy it, and I think they're being honest with me. It's gotten pretty good reviews. But probably the best compliment I ever got was this man from North Carolina who apparently hunted down here in Lower Alabama one time and had an experience. Right. And he called me and said, you don't know how much your book meant. He said, I actually had to undergo psychiatric treatment on what I had. And this guy, you look at his Facebook page, was a huge hunter. I mean, he hunts bears. You can see big bears on his page, nice, massive, 600-pound black bears. Right. And he's like, man, he said, you just don't know. It just confirmed everything that happened to me back in the 80s, or 90s, mid-90s. He said, my uncle leased a place there in Lower Alabama. He said, and I came up with him. I remember it was cold. It was very cold. And I remember that would have been around 95 or 96 when we had that big freeze. And He said, I got run out of the woods by one. He said, I'm sitting on a tripod. It was on the edge of a clear cut. I started smelling something. I heard it, and I said, that ain't a deer. I don't know what that is, but it got dark. I got down, and it said, this thing come after me. He said, I started running. It was right there with me, step for step. He said, I come across this lane. I shined my flashlight real quick as I turned to the left, and there it was standing 15 feet away.
Oh, wow.
Reddish brown, and it was just standing there looking at me. He said, I froze. I didn't know what to do, and finally it kicked in. I kept on running. He said, nobody believed me. Everybody made fun of me. I had to undergo psychiatric treatment. He said, and you see those bears on my Facebook page? He said, those things not even come close to comparing to the size of this thing that was on me.
Right.
And I said, well, where were you at? He said, near Burnt Corn. I said, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, my goodness. That's right down there in the same neck of the woods.
I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, well, call your uncle and find out exactly where you were. Mark, he called me back about a week or two later. He said, Ashley, he said, I was in some place called Pine Orchard. I said, no way. Come to find out, he was in the same hunting club that I hunted in the 90s when I got out of the military.
Wow.
I knew the exact stand he was sitting in. I know the people that was over at the Rileys, and as a matter of fact, it wasn't but about 3 miles from where all my stuff happened in Pine Orchard.
That's incredible.
Now, how was that for verification?
That's pretty awesome there.
And when I told him that, I said, you ain't going to believe this. And I started telling him, he damn near just started crying. He's like, I just can't believe that. I said, I'm telling you the truth, man. I said, I know where you were. I said, you were within 3 miles as a crow flies from where all this stuff happened in the book. I said, so don't think you're crazy.
No.
He said, no. He said, I don't. He said, I feel like I've been vindicated. So that made me feel really good about writing the book.
Sure, absolutely. Because I'm sure he, like you said, it verified what he had seen.
Absolutely. So I thought that was neat to throw that out there.
Yes.
Listen, Mark, I definitely appreciate the opportunity, and I hope a lot of people tune in. And if they want to get a copy of the book, they can send me a message on Facebook Messenger, or call McPhaul's Mercantile in Excel, Alabama, and I'll be happy to mail them one.
Yes, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put a link in at the bottom with a link to the store and the information there for the book. And people, if you're listening, the book was fantastic. I could not put it down. If you're a Bigfoot fan or someone who just loves diving into the unexplained, you got to read the book. It's really interesting, and will keep you captivated for sure. But Ashley, I appreciate it. And like I said, we really need to do a part 2 at some point.
Let's do it.
Yep, that sounds good.
Love to have you down in the area. You can see some of this stuff firsthand for yourself.
I might just take you up on that.
Sounds good.
Yep. But if you've had an encounter or an experience, something you can't explain, shoot me an email with your contact information at the Cryptid Crew Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless.